Circle round, if you will. I have a story that cannot wait to be told. This is a story about an orchard, some neighbors, and 37 campfires. This past spring, in April, the peach trees in my friend's orchard were in full bloom. Pink and coral and cream-colored blossoms danced on the limbs of 250 trees. After many warm days, however, temperatures were expected to drop well below freezing in the wee hours of a Monday night. Peach blossoms are especially vulnerable to spring frost. In fact, it is because of spring frosts that the trees in this orchard had borne fruit only once in 8 years. Determined to protect the blossoms, my friend, Farmer Susan, decided to light and tend campfires throughout the entire orchard, a fire every 15 feet in the alleyways between the rows of trees. In need of help, Susan put out a call. 4 of us, including our very own James Gordon, showed up at 10 p.m. to begin a night-long vigil. Others would join us throughout the night. Our task was to light and keep watch over 37 campfires. We began, as one does, with blowtorches. Lighting and building up all 37 fires until each became its own little engine that could, with enough coals generating enough heat that by midnight we found it possible to rest for spells. We made rounds every hour or so to stoke and to add logs to each fire. Between rounds, we gathered at one campfire in the center of the orchard. There we roasted marshmallows. We passed the whiskey bottle. We wandered off to pee and to check 2 thermometers. 1 thermometer was placed in the center of the orchard, and 1 was placed just outside it. As the night progressed, the temperatures in both thermometers continued to drop. And as this night progressed, I noticed an energy in myself that had long felt dormant, shaky with exhaustion, hungry, smelling like smoke. I also felt alive. Imagine, if you will, the sensory feast of this night. Imagine heat and chill on your skin. Imagine the scent of wood smoke, the sounds of coyotes, barred owls, spring peepers, the crack and hiss of campfires, and even at midnight, imagine the light, 37 campfires glowing, sparks drifting upward, joining a spangled net of stars, and the moon, a fat, golden, waxing gibbous moon just 5 days from becoming full. In this multi-sensory web of light and sound and scent, we are cradled, suspended, a time out of time. And to be real, I was also amped up on marshmallows. Layered in sweat and smoke, alternately overheating and freezing, and so tired I felt nauseated. And it felt so good to be alive. We were in service to nothing less than to peach blossoms and to one another. It felt like freedom. It felt like purpose. And we had no idea if it would work. So on this uncertain but glittering jewel of a night, a gift in the form of a question presented itself to me. What if this is how life could feel, even amidst the wreckage and the dismantling of so much that we hold dear? What if this is also how life could feel? And what if radical neighboring is how we get there? That phrase, radical neighboring, was already on my mind. A few weeks before that night, I had watched a documentary film about a farm in rural New York. The title of the film was Radical Neighboring. In the film, the farmer, Adam Wilson, describes an experiment he's engaged in with his neighbors. He says, "We're a bunch of people organizing around the best ideas we've got. And the experiment is whether it is possible to run a farm based on the gift economy rather than the market economy. In the face of rural poverty, rising food costs, and the prospect of food shortages, Wilson and his neighbors managed the farm almost entirely on gifts received. Everything from work boots to shared labor. And then they give away all the food the farm produces. And so, at 2 a.m. in the orchard, I stir coals with a poking stick. Flames rise up as the night's temperatures continue to fall. And I wonder, is this radical neighboring, this night of tending campfires? What does it mean to do radical neighboring? The word radical has been weaponized. It's used pejoratively to imply danger and violence. Think of phrases like radical feminism. Bring it on. The original meaning of the word radical is the opposite of threat and violence. It is quite beautiful. Radical means of or having roots, to originate in the root or ground, vital to life, going to the origin, essential like roots and orchard trees and neighbors. Writer and cultural historian Rebecca Solnit has much to say about how essential neighbors are, particularly during crises. Solnit reminds us that the people who do the really important work in disasters, which doesn't get talked about much, are the neighbors. Who's going to rescue you when your building collapses? When the ice storm comes and the power goes out, it's probably going to be the neighbors. In her book, A Paradise Built in Hell, Solnit explores people's responses in the aftermath of major disasters, including earthquakes in San Francisco and Mexico City, and Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. In contrast to persistent doomsday narratives about how people behave in crisis, Solnit found that local folks respond with resourcefulness, altruism, and bravery. Neighbors build robust and radical communities of care with and for each other. Disasters, Solnit contends, radically open people up to different social possibilities. In her own words, when all the ordinary divides and patterns are shattered, people step up to become their brother's keepers. And that purposefulness and connectedness bring joy even amidst death, chaos, fear, and loss. In light of these findings, Solnit asks, what if everything we've been told about human nature is wrong? And we're actually very generous, communitarian, altruistic beings who are distorted by the system we are in, but not made happy by it. What if we can actually be better people in a better world? Now, this night in the orchard, in which we are protecting peach blossoms from frost, this is by no means a disaster, unless you are a fragile peach blossom or a farmer whose livelihood depends on this crop. So I'm not equating the devastating and tragic disasters that Solnit studied to this one night of keeping an orchard warm enough so that it can bear fruit. But I am lifting up the possibility and the importance of neighborly projects in which we engage in shared labor, rooted in material, tangible purpose. Projects that add food to our tables, or that join us together in song, or that weatherize our homes to keep us warm in winter and cool in summer. projects that provide sustenance or comfort, or that ease or enliven some aspect of our lives. These small-scale projects are important in and of themselves. Their gifts are tangible, and in the process, we are building up the neighboring muscles, the skills, the networks, and the resources that will serve us if and when the bigger storms come. It is now 3 a.m. in the orchard. Another neighbor, Matt, arrives with fresh energy. Matt is, among other things, an actual fire dancer who performs at festivals. True story. He also happens to live right next door to this orchard. Matt is also my neighbor. I am particularly alive to the question of radical neighboring on this night because I am in my friend Farmer Susan's orchard. And it was Susan and her spouse, Alan, who made it possible for my family to rewild a patch of land adjacent to this very orchard by selling acreage to us at less than market value. How many nights would I be willing to stay awake tending fires to save these particular peach blossoms on this particular patch of ground alongside these particular people? I asked myself that question that night. How many nights would I be willing to do this? And my answer, as many as it takes. I knew with certainty that I was all in on this uncertain project, in part because of curiosity. Could this wild scheme actually work? And I am all in because I feel indebted to these neighbors. I choose this word indebted with deep intention. My friends Susan and Alan's many acts of generosity over the years have set in motion cycles of reciprocity. Giving and receiving draws others in with a gravitational pull. Because of Susan's need for assistance, others now are also giving and receiving, not just those of us at work in the orchard. Loved ones pack thermoses and take on family duties vacated by folks not at home that night. Many others now feel invested in the outcome. So gifts are in motion, gifts of time, labor, attention, and material resources. Does this reciprocity, does radical neighboring cost us something? Loss of sleep, loss of profit, loss of certainty, loss of safety? I believe it does. And here's what makes radical neighboring different from doing a good deed. Here's where I think the radical part comes in. In a society where we calculate risks, place profits above people and planet, it is radical to be in relationship with fellow humans, to be so entangled in giving and receiving that try as you might, you cannot keep track of who owes what to whom. Up till now, I've used the word neighbors without defining it. Do I mean neighbors in the most literal sense, those who live nearby, close together, adjacent? Yes and no. I look out at your faces gathered here this morning, and I experience you as neighbors. In this congregation, we worship together. We share meals and joys and sorrows. We take on projects together. Are we radically neighboring one another? Now it is 4 a.m. Ken, a fellow farmer, shows up with a pickup truck full of chopped wood. His arrival is unexpected. We cheer. We toss logs out of the truck bed onto the ground and cart them to the fires nearby. Ken's act was one of material aid, bringing wood right when and right where we needed it. And his neighborly response to arrive with hands full is an act as old as humans have been humaning. Our species has survived thus far in large part because People have shown up for one another with hands filled with firewood, with tools, with covered dishes of food or buckets of water, with Band-Aids and salves, with berries, nuts, and herbs. These neighborly gestures of material aid are both acts of generosity and acts of survival. Who among us would be here today if not for the many hands of others, both living and long deceased? There is a moment after Ken's arrival that I pause and turn in a circle to take in the whole scene. In this turning, I feel deep kinship with fire tenders and orchard keepers everywhere and every when. Feelings of separability across time and space dissolve. By now, the moon is beginning its descent. Humans across cultures and generations going back and back and back have given names to the moon. The full moon in April is also called the pink moon, egg moon, full fish moon, the moon of the red grass, budding moon, and the breaking ice moon. So I want to radicalize this idea of radical neighboring a little bit more. We are all conjoined. We are the legacy of all who have come before and the ancestors of all who are to come. What if radical neighboring gets to the root of what it actually means to be human and to be alive? What if we are here because we have been neighbored? What if the radical part is the act itself, the thing one does to turn the noun neighbor into the verb to neighbor? To think and act as if my survival depends on you, just as your survival depends on me. What if we are and have always been indebted to one another? In this congregation, many of us take part in chalice circles and in the sacred songs singing circles. I believe these acts of spiritual accompaniment are forms of radical neighboring, and we are engaged in acts of material accompaniment as well. Some among us have sponsored and welcomed refugee families into homes for months. Some among us distribute food weekly through Como Mobile Aid's Soup Kitchen. Others show up at the county jail to post bail and to drive a neighbor home. This is just a partial list. And I believe we will be called to even deeper and more courageous acts of radical neighboring. Is radical neighboring another way of saying mutual aid? Another way of being in solidarity? I believe it is, and I also believe the language of radical neighboring reminds us of who we are to one another. We need both fresh and ancient language, both new and ancient ways of relating to one another. What else can we do together to strengthen our solidarity muscles, to dissolve isolation, and to also get shit done? What else do we need? Do we need childcare and elder care collectives, canning and pickling circles? I can imagine a version of the apocalypse in which marauding bands of UUs with pitchforks in hand show up to mulch your garden, clean out neighbors' gutters, caulk one another's windows. Our very own mission statement calls us to radical welcome. And in a time of disastrous dismantling, might radical neighboring be the next right step? On this night in the orchard during this particular storm, we labored and we rested. One of us, fist raised, shouts, "Power to the peaches." One of us, famished, eats jar after jar of homemade pickled okra. One of us, some of us like okra. One of us stands at attention while that arcing moon, that breaking ice moon, spills light into the soil as it sinks below the western horizon. It is 6 a.m. By then we knew. The thermometer just outside the orchard registered 23 degrees Fahrenheit, low enough to have destroyed this season's crop. The thermometer inside the orchard, tucked into that notched trunk of a peach tree near the campfire we'd gathered at, that thermometer never dropped below 33.4 degrees. Yeah. We hadn't known it would work, but we did know how to light a fire, we did know how to tend it, and at each stage, we knew the next right step, and we knew this was no solo project. We were a bunch of people organizing together around the best ideas we had. And so this is how I want to show up. As things unravel around us, I want to show up with pickled okra, a shovel, maybe even a blowtorch. I want to show up with a willingness to give it a go, to experiment at the edge of what we believe to be possible. I want to work with small groups of people on small orchard-sized projects with small ambitions. I am done with scaling up. I am done with bigger is better. I am done with the language and the logic of empire that intrudes, that implants in us the destructive and frankly tired old stories that enough is never enough. Except that we can't entirely be done with all that, can we? Our lives are roped into big systems, and storms will come. And so, can we get more radical? By which I mean, can we root down deeper into our relationships with one another? Can we root down deeper into this place? Can we seed ourselves with new stories? Stories in which we are nourished by the fruits of our own shared labor. Stories in which survival looks and feels like tending an orchard with our beloved neighbors. What could possibly be more radical than that?